You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can go to our webpage at letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. The old shows, the new shows, the search, place to leave comments and questions, and if you want to join the show, and of course the all-important donate button. Holiday season, end of year, time where people are open to giving, and we ask you if you can help us out here in the studio, take care of our different expenses, the wonderful warm studios of NRM Streamcast, and if you could help us out, that would of course be greatly appreciated, and it would help us continue to grow. And in advance, I do thank you. And as we've been mentioning, we are in the top 10 in feed spots, 10 best Jewish book podcasts, and we are still at number 5. Must be holiday season. It's time for Hanukkah. Yay! We all love Hanukkah. Donuts, latkes, oily food, all the things that I know I should not be eating. And I try to, try. I do try not to overindulge, but, you got to have a donut. You got to have a latke. I mean, come on. Latke maybe with applesauce, maybe with sour cream. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. Jewish holidays seem to be filled with different kinds of food. There's probably a lot of good reasons for that. And maybe we'll even get there as the show moves along. But really, really, I would love to take a step back to see where it all began. We need the background. Sometimes having a background gives us a feeling of how appreciative we need to be for the miracles that took place. If we don't even know what's going on, if we don't have a feeling for the time frame, then how could we even recognize that miracles took place? So we got to go back to the beginning of the Second Temple, maybe even before. We're familiar with the Purim story, and that the Persians, Achashverosh, led us back. Eventually Achashverosh, but really his son, Daryavesh, lets the Jewish people back into the land of Israel, and we rebuild the temple. But really, really, throughout the entire Second Temple period, the Jewish people are never really in control. Different empires might allow us to live, might allow us to bring our sacrifices, allow us to study, allow us to build and have our religion, but we were never really in control of the land of Israel. Maybe that's debatable for some small windows in time, but overall, we need to know we're living in the country, we're living in Israel, and we have our temple, but we are not in control. So the beginning of the Second Temple is really going to be when the Greek Empire takes over. And of course, it all starts with Alexander, who conquers the world, basically rules for about 6 years, and then gets sick and dies. And his empire is split 3 ways. There's the southern kingdom, which we'll call North Africa, like with the risk board. You have Egypt, but it's really North Africa. That became the Ptolemy dynasty. You have the Syrian Greek northern kingdom, which is probably Syria, probably takes a nice chunk of the Middle East. There's a third area, Maybe that's Greece itself. Maybe that's part of Southern Europe, perhaps. It doesn't seem to play a role. The main areas was the Ptolemy dynasty in the south and the northern kingdom, which I believe most of the kings, at least early on, went by the name of Antiochus, at least in Hebrew. So Alexander is called into the land of Israel to, I'm not sure exactly do what. The Sadducees had brought him in and said that the Jews are rebelling. There's a lot of ill will between the religious Jewish people and the Sadducees. They never really were religious Jews. They wanted themselves to be Jewish, but they caused a lot of issues, and they were, as always, very powerful politically. So they called in Alexander, and they said the Jews were rebelling. At the time, what we'll call the Jewish leader was the high priest. The high priest's name was Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous. He was high priest for 40 years. He was a fantastic leader for the Jewish people, very righteous person. Miracles took place in his time. But again, this is the beginning of the Second Temple, and miracles are starting to fall off by the wayside. Prophecy is on its way out. And when Shimon HaTzadik heard that Alexander is marching on Jerusalem, so he took with him many high priests, and it's debatable what they dressed in. Some say they dressed in the priestly vestments and those garments of the priests. Some say they just wore, nice clothing. It's a little debatable. And Shimon HaTzadik, with his entourage, is marching. It's not an army. They're not going to fight. They're marching in one direction. Alexander's marching in the other direction. And in the morning, they're almost like across the field. And the Sadducees said, "That's the Jews. Alexander, they're the ones rebelling. Go after them." And Alexander sees as Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous, gets closer, and he gets off his horse, and the Talmud says he bows down to him. And the Sadducees, his soldiers are going crazy. Like, "Alexander, what are you doing?" And he says, "This is the picture I see every night when I go to sleep. The picture of this man is what I see when I go to sleep." So they meet. Now, again, it's debatable. What does that mean he saw in his dream? Some people say, yeah, God made a miracle. He should see what Shimon HaTzadik looks like. So when they meet, he will take care of him. Others say a totally different idea. The Greeks, when they were conquering the world, they didn't just want to conquer the world. What are they going to do with the whole world? They wanted the world to follow their culture, and the Greek culture was something that the world enjoyed. There was intelligence, there was philosophy, there was math, there was science, there was government. The people were people. So Alexander said, "I'm trying to create people." And looking at this holy rabbi, I see in his face, he is a person. I want people to look like him. That's another version of the story. In any case, they met, and Alexander said, "These Sadducees are claiming you're rebelling," and he said, "Your Majesty, it's not true. We would never rebel. We're not looking to rebel. They just don't like us." So Alexander gave them over in his hands, and he had them killed. Shimon HaTzadik had them killed. But Alexander says, I think as a sign of respect, I'm conquering the world. As a sign of respect, you should put my statue in your temple. So Shimon HaTzadik, a very brilliant man, said, "I have a much better idea. That's a piece of stone. That stone is nothing. This year, every Jewish boy that's born, again, debatable, either in a priestly family or in the whole Israel, any Jewish boy born, we will name that child Alexander in your honor." And that is why, amazingly enough, Alexander is a Jewish name. Because of this story, Alexander, and otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would somebody? I mean, we have Jewish names, we have English names, we have other names, but everybody has a Jewish name. But Alexander is actually a Jewish name. I have a friend, his name is Alexander. Over time, like everything else, the name changed, and you could have a name like Sender. Sender is really like Alexander, Sender, the end of the name. So the name has been around, obviously, for 2,000 plus years. So that was one thing that he offered him, and he accepted. And the other thing he offered him was that all documents will have the Greek date, which is really fascinating because normally a Jewish document should have to have a Jewish date in it. And they started putting in the Greek date. I don't know when that ended, but the idea of putting in Greek dates into Jewish contracts went on for hundreds of years, hundreds of years. The Talmud actually discusses if you're unsure what the Greek date is, what the Hebrew date is. So if you know one, they tell you how to figure out the other one. 40 years this way, 40 years that way. So it's fascinating. So that allowed the Jewish people. We had our temple, things were going well, at least for a small period of time. But the fact of the matter was, the Greek culture is now taking over the land of Israel. A lot of people like the Greek culture. Again, it's full of intelligence, doesn't make you required to keep any Torah and mitzvos. So a lot of people, I can't tell you what the numbers were, but a lot of people, and it's always the wealthy and the influential, like the idea that they don't have to listen to the rabbis. Now they could be in control, they can make the decisions. And this led to a change in the land of Israel. Again, the Jewish people per se are not being persecuted at this point. They understand they're under the control of first it's going to be the southern kingdom, then it's going to be the northern kingdom. As far as allowing us to live, we're allowed to live. During that time period when the southern kingdom was in control, the Septuagint, that the translation of the 70, was written into Greek, was translated. It was also miraculous, where it wasn't so good for us, but that's really a conversation in a couple weeks from now. About the Olympics also, by the way, is also a part of the Greek culture. So after about 114 years, the northern kingdom takes over. So this is actually about approximately 180 years into the Second Temple, but the northern kingdom was only in charge about 114 years, approximately. Because again, the Persians did control the country at first, but that, of course, once the Greeks conquer the Persians, that will change the whole dynamic. Anyways, then the northern kingdom takes over Israel. You have to, again, if you know geography, right? Nowadays, maybe it doesn't matter. But Israel, that piece of land is the connection between the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. So the world is traveling through Israel. So you want to be in control of all the merchandise, right? Taking by boats, you got to go all the way around Africa. There's no Suez Canal. So this is a major trade route from the east, from the west. It's very important. So Antiochus IV felt it his job to make sure that everybody follows Greek culture. And the children of Shimon HaTzadik, some were righteous, some were not. His son Chonyo was Kohen Gadol, he was the high priest, but he had a brother, Jason, who was more bent towards the Greek culture. He pays for the rights. Once he takes over, Antiochus will plunder the temple. There's basically a 3-year window where the Jewish people are going to suffer tremendously. But the suffering is not because they want to kill us. That's what we need to focus on. The suffering is not because they want to destroy the Jewish nation. They just want us to become Greek. They just want us to follow their culture. we had our own religion. We were very happy serving God. We weren't interested. If you're a barbarian, maybe you're interested in following a new culture. By the way, like the world does this, right? America will go into a country, they're not the first, they're not the last, right? And everybody believes if we show you our culture, you'll be very happy and you'll do whatever, you'll become just like us, and then we don't have to fight anymore. Anyways, he starts with decrees. Okay, he's already plundered the temple, and for the most part, already by this point, there's idols there in the temple. We're not hanging out in the temple anymore. Everybody's moved out. No Torah, no Sabbath, because Sabbath shows we believe in God and the creation of the world. Well, the Greek culture doesn't believe in that, so they got to get rid of Shabbos. No holidays, because we believe time is holy. The Greek culture says man is where it's all at. It all revolves around man and his body, and his how good he can fight and how good fast he can run, and they believe the development of their own philosophy and intelligence. Well, we say we have the Torah, we have all the intelligence already. Circumcision shows that the body serves God. Their bodies don't serve God if you're part of the Greek culture. You worship the body, right? It's something to think about a lot, especially when it comes to sports. Right? Are we worshiping the body? Are we worshiping God? Is my body serving God? Or am I serving my body? You have, of course, the famous story with Hannah and her 7 sons. Tragic story, but probably concept more common than we might imagine. So Antiochus, he wants them to serve idols. So this Hannah is brought in with her 7 sons. And each son, in turn, as he's brought in front of Antiochus, will say a verse. The younger they got, the more complicated the verse, which is quite fascinating. But each one said a Torah verse to say you're foolish and we're not serving your idols, and they were executed one by one till he gets to the youngest son, the 7th son of Hannah. And she says to the king, can I speak to my son for a second? So the king figures she doesn't want to lose all her kids. She'll convince this one to bow down. And she says to her son, fascinating. She says, you go up and tell Abraham that he sacrificed one child. He was willing to sacrifice one child, and he didn't even sacrifice them. I, on the other hand, sacrificed all 7 of my children. You go tell him. So the child goes back, and Antiochus says, I'm going to throw my ring on the floor. You'll pick up my ring, but it'll look like you're bowing down, and you'll live, and your mother will be happy, and I'll be happy. And the kid says, Your Highness, you're a fool. You want everybody bowing down, and you have to do a trick to get a little kid to bow down to you? You're a fool. And of course, the king has him executed. Hannah, then the story goes, she goes up onto a roof, and she jumps off. I mean, what mother can handle 7 children being killed? This is to give us a little bit of a feeling. These 3 years, the Jewish people were just being tormented. If you wanted to have a mezuzah on your doorpost, they took your door off. You had no doors. Animals could go wild into your house. They even made you write on the horn of your cow that you don't have a portion with God, because the horns were the baby bottles. Right? They would fill up the top and have a little poke a hole, and you're making the child nurse from this horn that says that you don't believe in God. Unfortunately, today I was by a funeral of a friend, a little older than me, not much older than me, and it was very sudden and very long, a lot of eulogies. But one of the sons said over, it's a famous story, his father had gone to a big rabbi in Israel. He says, my son is 6 months old. I want to make sure I educate him properly. I set him up on the proper path. So the rabbi said, you're 6 months too late. And you got to start at the beginning, even when they're being nursed, right? So the Greeks understood this. So let that child nurse from a horn that says, I don't believe in God. Right? That's a concept. So this is going on for a 3-year period. The famous Matisyo and his 5 sons, right? Judah Maccabee, right? So Matisyo is either the son of a high priest or himself was a high priest. They moved to a small city called Modi'in. Just to, don't hang out in the big cities. The big cities the Greeks have taken over. And a lot of Jews are Hellenists. They're with the Greeks. So the army came, and they wanted Matisyahu. They wanted Matisyahu to sacrifice a pig. For whatever reason, they sacrificed pigs to their idol, and Matisyahu refuses. And a Jew comes up to sacrifice the pig. So Matisyahu is incensed, and he kills the guy who sacrificed the pig, and he calls out, "Mi Lashem Eli." Whoever is to God is to me. And they create an army. The name of the family was the Hasmoneans, whether that's a city they came from, whether it was the name of a family, but they call themselves the Maccabees. And Maccabee comes from the word, it's an acronym. Either it's Matisyahu's name, it's Matisyahu Kohen ben Yochanan, beginning of each letter, or Mi Chamocha ben Hashem. Again, it's an acronym for different things. And even though he began the revolt, but actually Matisyahu is never really part of the fight at all. He's never really part of the battle because he dies. But his son Judah takes over the battle. Over the next 25 years, I believe almost all of them, maybe one, are killed in battle. These are righteous people. They are big rabbis, and they are about to do battle with the world power, the Greeks. And according to Josephus, there's multiple battles that take place with humongous armies. 40,000, 50,000, 70,000. It seems at the height, the Jewish army may have been made up of 6,000 people. A minuscule army, right? You don't win, right, those kinds of battles. But miraculously, these armies of Maccabees, not because they were mighty and not because they were so skilled in warfare. Yeah, it's not to say they didn't do ambushes and other things that you have to fight, but the numbers are so overwhelming that it doesn't make sense. Right? All they have to do is march, and they're just going to kill everybody. But miraculously, the Maccabees continued to win battles, and then after I believe it was 3 years, they had actually defeated the armies enough times, without going through all the different names, the generals and stuff. Then we go up to the Temple Mount. We go up to the temple to clean it up. And even there was still like a fortress next to the temple that the Greeks held on to for a number of years. There's no vessels. There's idols. There's a broken altar. We got to clean up the temple area. Got to get rid of all the idols. Got to get rid of the broken altar that was used. The whole place a disaster, right? And now they're looking for oil because they want to light the menorah. Now you have to know there's no hidden oil in the temple. The temple has storage rooms of flour and storage rooms of wine and storage rooms of oil. And while they're searching just to find some pure oil, now technically they didn't really need pure oil. The rule is if everyone is impure, you could bring impure oil as well. But because all the miracles were revolved around that we were fighting for our spirituality, we're fighting for our Torah, fighting for to be allowed to live as religious Jews, right? We weren't fighting to live, we were fighting for our spirit, for our religion. So they wanted to find pure oil. And sure enough, like either behind a wall or buried in the ground, they found one flask. Again, this is a warehouse. So a flask would have enough oil for one day. The problem was to get new pure oil, it's an 8-day, you have to travel in each direction, then you have to make the new oil. It was going to take 8 days to get new oil. But the flask only has enough oil for one day. And they lied it. It's debatable exactly how they did it, but in any case, there was a miracle that this oil lasts for 8 days. And everybody sees, so right? You see God let you win the battles, and now God is showing you the miracle with the menorah that represents Torah, that God cares that we are fighting for spirituality. And therefore, the next year, we go ahead and the holiday of Hanukkah is created with the candles, one new candle each night, or one new flame each night, to get to the number 8. So even that's some of the Talmud wanted to go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We say the laws, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. But it is fascinating. The rabbis never wanted to celebrate the victory, the military victory. It's not that they didn't recognize the miracle. In our prayers, we talk about this miraculous battle. What happens is that they want to celebrate the spiritual victory. So we have military victories. That's very nice. But what are we celebrating? What are we recognizing? That God took care of us. That we recognize with a spiritual victory. And therefore, the main celebration has to do with oil as well. The other part of what we're celebrating is the spiritual, not the physical. And therefore, we don't really have parties. I'm not saying we don't have parties, families get together, but there's no command to have a meal. The only reason we have meals is to get together to sing and praise God and thank God. And I hear way in the back, I hear my music playing. So I hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet. Thank you, of course, to all my wonderful sponsors in this.